The descent was a controlled plummet, a whisper of gravitic defiance against the planet's insistent pull. Inside the onyx glass drop pod, Kalen, Talon leader of the Xylos' first assault cadre, felt the familiar, reassuring hum of the inertial dampeners through the soles of his three-toed boots. His chitinous armor, a blend of biosteel and reactive polymers the color of a starless night, was cool against his gray skin. He flexed his four-fingered hands, the talons on each digit retracting with a soft click. "Final systems check," he sub-vocalized, his voice a low chitter in the private comms channel of his four-strong Talon. "Lyra, status." "Telemetry green, Talon leader," came the crisp, analytical reply. "Atmospheric composition within tolerance. Cloaking field is stable at 100%. The humans will not see or hear our arrival. Vorlag, ordnance." A guttural rumble answered, filled with predatory glee. "Plasma charges are primed and hungry, Kalen. Heavy repeater's core is glowing. Just point me at something soft and squishy." Kalen resisted the urge to chastise him. Vorlag's eagerness was his greatest asset and his most profound weakness. "Patience, Vorlag. We follow doctrine. Zane, you have the point on egress. Report." "Terrain matches the orbital scans." Zane's voice was a dry rustle, like leaves skittering across rock. "Canyon floor is approximately 100 meters below projected landing zone. Ravine-Six is nestled in a natural rock amphitheater, 2 primary structures, multiple smaller outbuildings. No unexpected energy signatures. It's quiet. Quiet is good," Kalen said, more to reassure himself than his team. "The High Command's intelligence suggests this outpost is purely industrial, minimal security, likely automated. The humans are stretching their resources too thin, a classic error of a species expanding beyond its means." He recalled the briefing from High Commander Thrax, his image shimmering on the main hololith of the orbiting battle cruiser, indomitable will. Thrax's mandibles had been set in a confident line. "The target is Ravine-Six, a Prometheum processing facility. It is a vital link in their colonial supply chain. Taking it offline will cripple their expansion efforts in this sector. Our long-range scans show no fleet presence, no significant defensive emplacements. This is a simple asset denial mission. Go in, plant the charges, and exfiltrate. The glory of the Xylos Imperium demands swiftness and precision. And precision. The creed of the first assault cadre. They were the scalpel of the Imperium, not the hammer. For 3 generations, the Xylos had waged this war against the soft-skinned, bipedal mammals who called themselves humans. It had been a war of methodical conquest. The Xylos were stronger, faster, and more disciplined. Their technology was superior. Humanity's only advantage had been its stubborn, inexplicable refusal to accept the logic of its own extinction. They fought with a ferocity that bordered on insanity, but it was the ferocity of cornered prey, not the calculated aggression of a true predator. The pod's descent ended with a sigh, the grav drive settling it onto a wide, flat mesa overlooking the outpost. The forward hatch irised open, revealing the alien landscape of Kepler 186f. 2 pale suns, one orange and one a dimmer red, hung in a sky the color of bruised plums. The air was thin, carrying the scent of metallic dust and strange, faintly sweet vegetation. Below them, Ravine-Six sat in the shadows of the colossal canyon. It was a scar of gray and rust-brown industry carved into the planet's ochre rock. Massive, silent ore haulers stood like sleeping metal beasts. A web of catwalks and pipelines connected a towering processing plant to a squat, windowless habitation block. Everything was still. No lights flickered. No steam vented. No distant engine rumble disturbed the profound silence. "Zane, move," Kalen commanded. The scout slipped from the pod, his slender form almost invisible against the rock. He moved with a liquid grace, his feet making no sound. The rest of the Talon followed, fanning out into a standard Overwatch formation. Vorlag hefted his heavy repeater, the weapon groaning softly as it powered up. Lyra unslung her sensor array, its multifaceted lens sweeping the valley. "Still nothing, Kalen," she reported, her voice laced with the barest hint of confusion. "No active power signatures, not even life support. The entire facility is cold." "It has already been abandoned," Vorlag grunted. "The cowards fled when they knew the Imperium was coming." "They had no way of knowing we were coming," Kalen countered, his gaze sweeping the silent structures. This was wrong. An industrial outpost of this size required constant maintenance, a skeleton crew at the very least. To find it utterly inert felt unnatural. It was a violation of logic. He felt a faint prickle along the sensitive nerves at the back of his skull, a primal instinct that screamed of ambush. But there was no evidence. No heat signatures, no electronic signals, no movement. Only silence. We proceed, Kalen decided, pushing his unease aside. Doctrine was clear. In the absence of a threat, press the objective. Zane, find us a path down. Lyra, monitor all frequencies, even the archaic radio bands. Vorlag, cover our rear. We move as one. The descent into the canyon was tense. The towering rock walls seemed to watch them, their surfaces carved by millennia of wind into shapes like screaming faces. The silence was an active presence, pressing in on them, amplifying the sound of their own breathing and the soft whir of their armor's servos. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every gust of wind sounded like a whisper. They reached the canyon floor, the red dust crunching under their boots. They stood in the shadow of one of the giant ore haulers. Its tires were taller than Vorlag, its surface pitted and scarred. Kalen ran a gloved hand over the metal. There was a fine layer of dust, but it was uniform, undisturbed. They've been gone for days, perhaps weeks, Lyra observed, analyzing the particulate matter. The dust settlement is consistent with at least 15 local cycles of inactivity. So they did run, Vorlag sneered. Then why leave everything intact? Kalen asked, gesturing to the silent factory. This equipment is valuable. A retreating force would scuttle it. This looks less like a retreat and more like everyone simply vanished. He approached the main entrance to the habitation block. The heavy metal door was slightly ajar. A stenciled sign in the blocky human script read, "Welcome to Ravine-Six, watch your step." Below it, someone had scrawled another word in what looked like dried mud. Don't. A warning, Zane rustled. Or a joke. Humans have a crude sense of humor, Vorlag said. Let's go in. The primary fusion reactor should be in the sublevels. That's where we plant the main charge. Hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. Zane, on point. Zane slipped through the gap in the door. The rest followed, their weapon-mounted illuminators cutting sharp cones of white light into the oppressive darkness inside. They were in a wide corridor that smelled of stale air and faint chemical cleaner. Doors lined the hallway, leading to what were likely crew quarters. Most were closed. One was open. Inside, the scene was eerily domestic. A bunk with rumpled sheets, a datapad lying on a small table, its screen dark, a cup containing a desiccated brown residue. Kalen picked up the datapad. It was dead, its power cell drained. It's a stage, Lyra whispered, her voice tight. Look, she pointed to the floor. No dust. This room has been cleaned recently. But the cup, the bed, it's all arranged to look abandoned in a hurry. The prickle at the back of Kalen's skull intensified into a throbbing ache. He understood. The silence, the abandoned look, the open door, it wasn't negligence. It was an invitation. This is a trap, he subvocalized, keeping his voice level. Fall back, we exit the structure now, Vorlag protested. We've seen nothing. We can't abort on a feeling, Kalen. Will obey my command, Vorlag, Kalen snapped. This is a hunting ground, we are the prey. If on cue, a soft click echoed down the hallway behind them. Zane, who was nearest the entrance, spun around. The main door, he hissed, it just sealed. A heavy thud confirmed it, they were locked in. See, Vorlag's voice held a tremor that wasn't bravado. Now we have to go forward. No, Kalen said, his tactical mind racing, overriding the rising panic. We make our own exit. Vorlag, your plasma charge, the wall to my left. It leads outside. Vorlag nodded, fumbling for a small, circular charge from his belt. As he moved to place it on the wall, another sound broke the silence. It wasn't a noise of mechanics or weapons. It was a soft, wet scraping sound coming from further down the main corridor. They all froze, their illuminators snapping towards the sound. The corridor stretched into blackness. The scraping came again, closer this time. Thermal scan, Kalen ordered. Nothing, Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. No heat, no energy, it's impossible. The scraping was louder now, accompanied by a faint, rhythmic dripping. It was the sound of something heavy and wet being dragged across the floor. Hold position, Kalen commanded, his grip tightening on his plasma rifle. He took a step forward, his light beam probing the darkness. The beam caught something on the floor. A smear of dark liquid leading away into the black. Suddenly, from the end of the hall, a single light flickered on. It wasn't a bright, sterile human light. It was a chemical glow stick, casting a sickly green pallor. In its faint light they saw a figure. It was a Xylos, or what was left of one. Its armor was shattered, its gray skin pale and bloodless. It was propped against the far wall, its head lolling. And from a deep wound in its chest, something was spilling out, creating the pool of liquid on the floor. It was one of their own. But the Imperium had never sent forces to this planet before. This was their first assault. That's not possible, Vorlag stammered. It's a scout, Zane breathed. From the initial survey mission. They were declared lost in an ion storm. The corpse was a message, but the true horror was what happened next. From the darkness above the body, a thin line descended. It was a cable, and at its end was a small speaker. A voice crackled to life, distorted and low, speaking their own language, the Xylos tongue. It was a recording. Glory to the Imperium, it rasped. It was the last transmission of the lost scout team. A chilling, mocking echo. Then every light in the corridor, their weapon lights, the green glow stick, extinguished simultaneously. They were plunged into absolute, suffocating blackness. For a moment, there was only the sound of their own ragged breathing. Lyra. Emergency flares, Kalen yelled. They won't ignite, Kalen. Something's interfering with the chemical reaction. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced Kalen's disciplined mind. Their illuminators were dead. Their flares were useless. Their night vision optics flickered, showing only static-laced chaos. The humans weren't just hiding in the dark. They were controlling it. A scream tore through the blackness. It was Zane. It was short, sharp, and ended with a sickening, wet crunch. Zane, Kalen shouted, firing his rifle blindly down the hall. The bolt of blue plasma lit the corridor for a split second, revealing nothing but empty space where Zane had been standing. He was gone. There in the ceiling, Vorlag roared, firing his heavy repeater upwards. Chunks of metal and conduit rained down, but there was no answering cry of pain. Then came the sound. From all around them, a low, rhythmic thumping. It grew louder, more insistent, resonating through the floor, through the walls, through the very air. It was the sound of the outpost's heavy machinery coming to life. Pistons the size of drop pods began to cycle. Giant gears began to turn. The entire facility was waking up. But it wasn't the hum of production. It was a discordant, terrifying symphony of industrial noise, an auditory assault designed to disorient and overwhelm. The floor beneath them began to vibrate violently. Back to back, Kalen screamed over the cacophony. He found Lyra, his hand closing on her shoulder pauldron. Vorlag stumbled into him a second later. They formed a tight triangle in the screaming dark. A section of the wall to their right slid away with a groan of tortured metal, revealing not an exit, but a massive, rotating fan blade. Its edges sharpened to a monomolecular thinness. It began to pull the air in the corridor towards it, creating a powerful vortex. Move! Kalen shoved Lyra away from the fan. He saw Vorlag lose his footing, his heavy weapon making him unbalanced. The big warrior scrabbled for purchase on the vibrating floor, his talons screeching against the metal. He was being dragged inch by inch towards the spinning blades. Vorlag bellowed, his voice a mixture of terror and disbelief. Kalen lunged, grabbing Vorlag's arm, but the suction was too strong. He saw the raw panic in his soldier's eyes, the hubris stripped away to reveal a child's fear. For a fleeting moment, their gazes locked. Then Vorlag's grip slipped. The heavy repeater was pulled in first, vanishing into the blur of the fan with a catastrophic shriek of metal on metal. Vorlag followed a second later. His scream was mercifully short. A fine red mist sprayed out from the fan, coating Kalen and Lyra in a warm, slick film. Kalen didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lyra's arm and dragged her down the corridor, away from the fan, deeper into the facility. The industrial noise was deafening, the darkness absolute. They were being herded like livestock in a slaughterhouse. Every path they took seemed to be chosen for them, with sections of wall and floor shifting and rearranging, closing off routes behind them, opening new ones ahead. The humans were not fighting them. They were playing with them, dismantling them, unit by unit, soldier by soldier, and Kalen, Talon leader of the Xylos' first assault cadre, the pride of the Imperium, finally understood. They had not come to a silent outpost. They had stepped into the jaws of a patiently waiting beast. In the cool, quiet dark of the command bunker, buried half a kilometer deep in the canyon rock, Major Eva Rostova watched the chaos unfold on a bank of monitors. The images were a chaotic dance of infrared, thermal, and seismic sensor feeds. She saw the panicked, heat-blurred shapes of the two remaining aliens stumbling through the reconfigured maintenance tunnels of Sector Gamma. Subject Delta is neutralized, Corporal Anya Sharma reported, her voice calm, almost clinical. Her fingers danced across a control panel, rerouting power to the magnetic lock on Corridor 7B. That was Vorlag, the heavy weapons specialist. Messy, Sergeant Marcus Thorne grunted from his station. He was a slab of a man with a graying beard and hands permanently stained with grease and hydraulic fluid. He was the architect of this mechanical hell. The blade assembly on Fan 12 will need to be replaced. Those alien alloys are tough. It for post-action maintenance, Marcus, Rostova said, her eyes never leaving the screens. Her voice was flat, betraying none of the cold knot of tension in her stomach. What's the status of the remaining two? The leader, Kalen, and the technician, Lyra, Sharma supplied. They're moving towards the primary smelting chamber, just as you predicted, Major. Is predictable, Rostova murmured. They're trying to find a large, open space, a defensible position. They think they're still in a tactical situation. Should we end it? Sharma asked, a faint tremor in her voice. She was young, brilliant with systems, but she had never seen war conducted like this. This wasn't war. It was extermination. Rostova looked at the corporal. Sharma's dark eyes were wide, reflecting the ghostly green light of the displays. She saw the moral weight of their actions pressing down on the young soldier. No, Corporal, Rostova said softly. This isn't about killing them. It's about teaching them. They need to experience the full lesson. Lesson being? Thorne asked, his gruff voice cutting through the quiet. He didn't question her methods, but he needed to understand the purpose behind the brutality. He had built these systems, turned this outpost from a place of industry into an instrument of terror. He needed it to mean something. Rostova turned her gaze back to the main monitor, where the two alien heat signatures were now entering the vast, cavernous smelting chamber. The Xylos see the universe as a simple equation, she explained, her voice taking on a lecturer's tone. They are the predators, everything else is prey. They see us as disorganized, emotionally compromised, soft-skinned mammals. They believe we are an infestation to be cleansed, a resource to be harvested. They value strength, discipline, and technological superiority. They cannot comprehend a different kind of power. She pointed a finger at the screen. We are teaching them that there are predators in the universe that do not roar. There are hunters that do not show themselves until the trap is sprung. We are showing them the terror of the unknown. We are weaponizing their own rigid logical minds against them. By butchering them in the dark, Sharma whispered. By showing them that their strength is a weakness, Rostova corrected. Their discipline crumbles into panic when their doctrine fails. Their technology is useless when we control the environment. They came here expecting a fight. We are giving them a horror story, a story they will take back with them. It's cheaper than starships and a hell of a lot more effective. She leaned forward, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the console. Marcus, initiate final phase. Kill the noise. Thorne nodded grimly and flipped a large, guarded switch. In the smelting chamber, the deafening industrial symphony abruptly ceased. The sudden, profound silence was more jarring than the noise had been. Kalen and Lyra, huddled behind a massive, cold ingot mold, flinched at the stillness. Status, Lyra, Kalen panted, his body drenched in Vorlag's blood and his own cold sweat. I don't know, she stammered, her analytical mind shattered. Comms are still jammed. All my instruments are dead. Kalen, what is this place? A tomb, Kalen replied, his voice a dead monotone. He finally accepted it. The objective was lost. His team was lost. His own life was forfeit. There was only one mission left, to get a message out. To warn the Imperium. He looked down at the small, automated scout drone still attached to his belt. It was a last resort, a simple fire-and-forget unit with a hardened, short-burst transmitter. Its battery was independent. Its systems were self-contained. It might be able to break through the jamming. "Lyra, I need you to interface with this drone," he said, detaching it. "Strip its tactical programming. All I need is for it to ascend, record a wide-angle visual of the canyon, and transmit that data on a continuous loop until its power fails." "Can you do that?" Lyra looked at the drone, then back at Kalen. She saw the resignation in his eyes. He was giving her a final task to focus her mind, to keep her from collapsing into terror. She nodded, her hands surprisingly steady as she took the device and began prying open its access panel with a small tool from her wrist gauntlet. As she worked, Kalen scanned the vast, dark chamber. It was immense, the ceiling lost in impenetrable shadow. The only light was the faint, plum-colored glow from the planet's sky, filtering through high, grime-caked windows. He could just make out the shapes of catwalks and gantries high above. He knew the humans were up there, watching. A single, powerful spotlight blazed to life, pinning them in its beam. Kalen threw his arm up to shield his eyes. "They're done playing," he murmured. From the darkness, a shape emerged. It wasn't a human. It was another Xylos soldier, or the tattered remains of one. It was being puppeted by thick cables attached to its limbs, its head hanging limp. It was one of Zane's squad mates from the lost recon team. Then another spotlight flared, revealing a second puppeted corpse. And a third. An entire squad of dead Xylos, their armor breached, their bodies desecrated, were being lowered from the ceiling like grotesque marionettes. They danced and twitched in the spotlights, a silent, mocking honor guard. Lyra let out a choked sob, her work on the drone faltering. "Keep working, Lyra," Kalen ordered, his voice hard as diamond. He raised his rifle and fired at the cables holding one of the bodies. The plasma bolt vaporized the cable, and the corpse fell to the floor in a heap. His defiance was met with another change. The spotlights shifted, moving away from the dangling corpses to illuminate the far wall of the chamber. It was a massive, flat expanse of reinforced rockcrete, and on it something was arranged. Kalen's 3 hearts went cold. They were bodies, more Xylos bodies, dozens of them, the missing recon platoon. They were pinned to the wall, their limbs and even sections of their gleaming black armor contorted and fixed in place. They weren't just pinned there. They were arranged. They formed letters in the blocky, brutal script of the human alphabet. Lyra finished her work. "The drone is ready, Kalen." He said, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes transfixed by the horrifying tableau on the wall. He couldn't read the human letters, but he knew with chilling certainty that this was the true message. This was the core of the lesson. Lyra activated the drone. It whirred to life, hovered for a moment, and then shot upwards, a tiny silver fish swimming towards the surface of a dark ocean. As it ascended, the main lights in the chamber began to power on, one by one with agonizing slowness. The full scale of the horror on the wall was revealed. It was a masterpiece of macabre engineering. Rebar and sharpened lengths of pipe had been used to impale the corpses, fixing them to the rock. Limbs had been broken and reset to form curves. Torsos were positioned to create straight lines. Helmets were angled just so, their dark visors like vacant eyes in a mosaic of death. From the command bunker, Rostova watched the drone's camera feed on her main screen. It rose above the smelting chamber, giving her a clear view of Thorne's handiwork. "Is that all of them, Marcus?" she asked quietly. "Every last one from the recon platoon we ambushed last month," Thorne confirmed, his voice devoid of pride. "Took my team 3 weeks to get it right. The smell, you get used to it. Mostly." Sharma was silent, her face pale. She was staring at her own console, which translated the human letters into the angular script of the Xylos. She knew what the message said. The drone cleared the roof of the facility and climbed high into the canyon, its camera panning to capture the entire outpost, the towering rock walls and the 2 tiny, trapped figures far below. Then, from the shadows of the catwalks, the humans finally showed themselves. They were not clad in shining armor. They wore simple, dark gray fatigues and exoskeletons designed for industrial labor, not war. They carried repurposed mining tools, pneumatic drills, hydraulic cutters, rivet guns. They were not soldiers. They were butchers. They began to descend, their movements slow, deliberate, and utterly menacing. Lyra screamed, a raw, high-pitched sound of pure terror that cut through Kalen's shock. She fired her sidearm wildly, the small plasma bolts ricocheting harmlessly off the far walls. Kalen didn't fire. He simply stood and watched them come. He had sent the drone. He had delivered the warning. That was his final act of defiance. Now all that was left was the final, brutal lesson. He lowered his rifle and waited. He thought of High Commander Thrax, safe on his orbiting warship. He hoped the drone's message would be clear. He hoped Thrax would understand the nature of the predator they had so foolishly provoked. The humans were not cornered prey. They were something far, far worse. They were artists, and their medium was terror. High Commander Thrax paced the bridge of the indomitable will. His patience was worn thin, shredded by hours of absolute silence from the planet below. The mission was already 4 hours past its projected completion time. Kalen was his best Talon leader. Disciplined, efficient, flawless. For his entire unit to go dark was not just anomalous, it was impossible. Status of the communication link? Thrax demanded, his mandibles clicking with irritation. Still nothing, High Commander, the comms officer replied, his voice strained. We're being actively jammed. The interference is sophisticated, broadband, and originating from the outpost itself. They knew we were coming. Impossible, Thrax spat. Our approach was shielded by 3 layers of stealth protocols. They are primitive, they lack the technology. Nevertheless, sir, the jamming is real. Thrax felt a flicker of unease, which he quickly crushed with anger. This was a direct challenge to his authority, a stain on his military record. He had personally assured the War Council that the human colonies in this sector were ripe for the taking. Prepare a squadron of orbital interceptors, he commanded. Target the primary structure of Ravine-Six. I will blast that rock into dust. If my Talon is lost, the humans will pay a price in fire. If our soldiers are still alive, his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vrel, began cautiously. Then they will have the glory of dying for the Imperium, Thrax roared. It was then that a new signal flickered on the main screen. It was weak, heavily degraded, but it was a Xylos transmission. A drone signal. We have a signal, the comms officer announced. It's a low-power, short-burst transmission. Trying to lock on, I'm getting visuals. It's from Kalen's scout drone. The bridge crew leaned forward as one. A grainy, chaotic image resolved on the screen. It was a view from above, looking down into the heart of Ravine-Six. They could see the layout of the facility, the towering canyon walls. There, Vrel pointed, 2 heat signatures in the large central chamber. It must be Kalen and another survivor. Thrax felt a surge of relief. They were alive. Trapped but alive. What else can you see? Where are the humans? The drone's camera panned, its automated protocol sweeping the area. It focused on the massive wall of the smelting chamber. The image was clearer now, the resolution improving as the drone climbed higher, away from the worst of the interference. The bridge fell silent. No one spoke. No one breathed. They simply stared at the image, their advanced, logical minds struggling to process what their eyes were seeing. They saw the bodies of their kin. Not just dead, but displayed, arranged, composed. They saw the gleam of their own biosteel armor twisted into obscene shapes. They saw familiar forms, the noble warriors of the Xylos, reduced to mere pigment in a monstrous piece of art. And they saw the message. Though none of them could read the human language, the intent was unmistakable. The sheer, calculated horror of it transcended language. It was an act of psychological warfare so profound, so utterly alien to their own concepts of conflict, that it bypassed reason and struck directly at the species' primal core. What is it? A junior officer whispered, his voice trembling. What does it say? Thrax couldn't answer. He felt a coldness spreading through his limbs, a dread so complete it felt like his own blood was turning to ice. He stumbled back, his hand finding the edge of a console to steady himself. His ambition, his anger, his pride, it all evaporated, leaving only a hollow, cavernous fear. This was not a message of defiance from a species on the verge of defeat. This was a predator baring its teeth. A predator that had studied them, understood their psychology, and crafted a nightmare specifically for them. The drone's camera tilted down one last time before the signal died. For a brief, terrible moment, they saw figures in crude exoskeletons descending upon the 2 lone heat signatures. They saw the glint of repurposed industrial tools. They were not carrying rifles or plasma casters. They were carrying implements for cutting, for rendering, for taking things apart. The screen went to static. The silence on the bridge stretched for an eternity. Then, one of the officers turned away from his console and retched violently into a waste receptacle. Thrax stood motionless. The afterimage of the wall of corpses burned into his optic nerves. The meatwork, the sheer, patient, methodical depravity of it, he finally turned to his comms officer, his voice a dry, broken rasp. "Get me the War Council. Emergency session. Now." The meeting of the Xylos War Council was a somber affair. The image from the drone was projected onto the central hololith, a silent, terrifying monument to their arrogance. The military hardliners were speechless. The political strategists were pale. It was an elder counselor, a philosopher named Xylos, who finally spoke, his voice quiet but resonant. For generations, we have viewed this conflict through a single lens. Predator and prey. We are the predator. The humans, the prey. Our strategy, our technology, our very culture is built upon this assumption. He gestured a four-fingered hand towards the horrifying image. We were wrong. We did not encounter prey. We encountered a competitor, another apex predator, one whose evolutionary path took a different turn. Hunting strategy is not based on physical superiority, but on psychological dominance. They do not seek to simply kill their rivals. They seek to unmake them, to dismantle their spirit, to infect their collective consciousness with terror, to turn their own minds into weapons against them. Xylos looked directly at Thrax, his ancient eyes filled not with accusation, but with a deep, sorrowful understanding. You sent Kalen's Talon to destroy an outpost. Instead, the humans used them to write a message not for Kalen but for us, for this very council, for our entire species. What is the message? Demanded a grizzled general. That they are barbarians. That they have no honor. No, Xylos said softly. The message is on that wall. The translation was provided by our linguistic engines an hour ago. It is two simple human words. A hush fell over the council chamber. Every eye was on Xylos, send more. The two words echoed in the silence, pregnant with a meaning far heavier than their simple definition. It was not a plea, it was not a threat, it was an invitation, a challenge. An expression of an appetite so vast and so terrible it defied comprehension. Thrax closed his eyes, the image of the wall, the message, searing itself into his memory forever. They had sought to conquer a species. Instead, they had awakened something that would haunt their nightmares for generations to come. The vote was swift, unanimous. All military deployments to human-controlled or contested systems are to be halted, effective immediately, the Council's adjudicator announced, his voice grim. A full moratorium on engagement is now in effect. We will begin a complete reassessment of human psychological, cultural, and military capabilities. This council is adjourned. The war was not over, but it had changed. The Xylos, the proud, logical conquerors of a dozen star systems, were no longer the hunters. They were now the observed, and they had no idea what the other predator, lurking in the dark spaces between the stars, was planning for its next masterpiece. The silence from Ravine-Six had ended, replaced by an echo that would ring across the galaxy for a long time to come.